all right, this is a presentation. So it's for Nature's Edge in the Gap. Now at Adpen, we have a motto of shaping the world we live in by creating predictable investment returns. So that is our motto, that is our mantra. So myself, I have a civil engineering degree. I've done $700 million worth of engineering projects, or just shy of that. And I managed a big portion of those before I went out full time into property development. So I worked for companies like Engineers Queensland, Golding and BMD for 8 years. And I've been in property development for the last 13 years, including when I was still working full time as an engineer for those companies. So prior to starting Adpen, I actually had another company, which was the first development I did. And I'm most proud of my first development because it was the first one I ever did. I bought these 2 properties when I was 22, or not these 2, this was the completed product, but I bought 2 properties when I was 22, and I did this development, which was 2 houses and 3 townhouses at the back. It was valued at $3 million, and it was in a suburb called Morningside, which is 5 kilometers east of Brisbane CBD. And I'm really proud of that because that project is now over 10 years old, and it still pretty much looks exactly the same as that, as in it pretty much hasn't dated. So it's quite timeless, and I made sure that it was a high quality project. The silliest thing I did was actually sell all of that project, because if I had retained the dwellings, I would have actually made a lot more money from the buy and hold over the course of the next year or 2 after I'd finished. But we still made money on it, and that was a successful project I did with a couple of investors, including the landowner. So from then, I've graduated from doing a smaller project like that to then now doing a couple $100 million of projects, and these are a couple of examples of those. So Morayfield Marketplace, estimated value of 42 million. It's actually looks a little bit different to that image, but that's what it started life as a full line shopping center. It's condensed in the commercial, but there's a lot more residential. And Beckett Place, which is valued at around 34 million on end completion. So there are a couple of the projects. There's obviously a few more than that. Now, for people that are interstate, if you don't know about Brisbane and Queensland, these are some statistics about investing or moving to Queensland. There's 106,000 net migration to Queensland, and that was in the 2019 year. I'm using that year because there's not really been any consistent data thereafter. So this is from 2019. So it's about 110,000 people per annum were moving, prior to COVID. So that's going to be around about the same now that we've started to ramp up, maybe even more than that. So that 110,000 people is actually almost the same as what Sydney and Melbourne get. The difference is that with Brisbane and Southeast Queensland, the current population is so much smaller. So it means that there's opportunity for a lot more growth, so a lot more housing to come. So the percentage growth rate in terms of population is so much higher. So we get suburbs in Southeast Queensland where they go from 0 population to like 50,000, for example, like Springfield. So there's a lot of population growth that's happened, and there's a lot more to come. The difference here is there's a lot less competition in Southeast Queensland. So that's what I see as the biggest advantage for Southeast, and there's some other ones. I mean, Sydney and Melbourne, sure, there's developments that make money, and you can do it down there. And I know other people are doing lots of developments in those areas, but I like Brisbane. I know the area, I know the landscape, and I stick to my patch. So all of my developments are around Southeast Queensland. And then we've got some pretty significant projects like Queen's Wharf, which is worth $4 billion. It's probably more than that because costs are blown out. And this is a bit dated. So you can see that the end completion was expected to be 2022. It's more like going to be completed probably late 2024, maybe even 25. So it's a 6-star hotel, casino, and it's going to create a huge amount of money for Southeast Queensland with tourism, and obviously the investment in the project as well with jobs and construction. So that's Queen's Wharf. It's at about almost the top of this building at the moment, where they've just basically built the shell. So it's starting to come to life. Brisbane Airport runway, I actually worked on this project when I was an engineer. So I commenced in 2012. I was there in about 2012 when it commenced. At the moment, they've finished the dual runway, so you can land planes in either direction at the same time. And now they've just got to build the terminal work. So that's finished. Brisbane Cross River Rail is under construction. That's estimated at like $5.5–6 billion of investment, and that's due to be completed. It says by 2024, but I think it's more like going to be 25, 26. So it's a bit behind. Kingston Smith Drive upgrade is already completed. And obviously we've got the Olympics coming as well. So this is a recent article from the Financial Review talking about $7 billion of funding for the Olympics in Queensland. So now, just because they're pumping all this money into the infrastructure doesn't necessarily mean that property prices are going to go up off the back of this. Now, it definitely helps because a lot more money being injected into the area, but you still need to be able to buy astutely. You can't just buy anything, expect that it will go up. Although in recent times, people have been lucky enough to do that. So the $7 billion of Olympic funding that is coming on top of those projects I showed you. Now, our team, we're quite small. So between 6 staff that we basically have full-time and some of them part-time, plus then obviously the education business side of the business. But our staff, we run, $200 million worth of projects in-house. There's a lot of external consultants that we rely on. So if you had a look at all the people we employ, including the contractors and all that, it'd be probably in the hundreds, but the core team is quite small. So we do run a small team. It used to be a lot bigger. We used to do a lot more in-house, but I decided to outsource a lot of different things just because it's more efficient to outsource some things than do it in-house. The location of the project is in a suburb called the Gap. It's about 8 to 10 kilometers west of Brisbane CBD. So Brisbane's over to the right, if you know the area and you know the landscape. So it's just here. It sits literally diagonally across pretty much unlimited bushland, including this inaugural reservoir. So it's right next to nature, hence Nature's Edge as the name. So this is the site location here. And you can see the dam is right across the road. So you can go paddle boarding on the dam, you can go swimming there. They've got like a little man-made beach in there. And then there's a whole lot of running tracks that you can get and hiking tracks that you can get lost in. And then, you've got Brisbane CBD, which is about 10 kilometers via the road. So over here, so it'd be 8 kilometers as a crow flies. Ashgrove, which is a nearby suburb, is only a few kilometers away. You've got a couple of local high schools. The airport is 20 kilometers away. So there's a lot of different amenity close by. And obviously being this close to the city and still having access to nature, which is right across the road, is very unique even for Brisbane. So there's not many suburbs. There's only really 2 or 3 suburbs in all of Brisbane that have this much green space this close to the city. And really, if you have a look at this map, it's really this area here, which is the Gap. And then over the other side of the hill, there's another area, Kenmore, Chapel Hill, Fig Tree Pocket, and very similar suburbs around about 8 to 10 kilometers from the CBD. And very much undervalued suburbs when you compare them to their nearby neighbor, including this one, like Ashgrove. Ashgrove's got like a 50% premium on the Gap, and it's really only a couple of kilometers down the road. And it doesn't have as much green space. So that's the location. This is a render of the completed product. So the architectural design has been done by a very well-renowned architect out of Melbourne called Nigel Fitton. He designed the Museum of Modern Art just recently. He did the tallest residential tower in Melbourne for its time, which was the Eureka Tower, the one with the gold plate on the top, if you don't know that tower. So he's responsible for doing some pretty significant landmarks in around Australia and the rest of the world. And I was fortunate enough to actually hire him through a friend. And he did this design, and he also did some other designs for me as well, including some mid-rise unit blocks. So these designs are funky. They're designed as like ultra modern, and there's nothing else like this in Brisbane. And this is actually the second project he's done, or actually, sorry, third project he's done in Brisbane. And they've all been for me. So the only reason I was fortunate enough to get him was through a referral of a friend. So 3 of these have sold already. In actual fact, they had been resold previously, but the project had some delays over COVID, and then had some further delays with obtaining a builder. So this project has been delayed by a couple of years, most of which has been the delay in actually securing or locking down a builder. So there's a couple of sales, there's one on hold. So all in all, about a third of the debt is already been paid for already in pre-sales, if not more than that. And then just some internal renders on what the end product's going to look like. This is unit 1. It's a 3-level unit, or 3-level house, kitchen, dining, living. So they are all 4-bedders with the exception of one of them. They're basically houses on smaller lots. So if you do a comparison to a house, you can get a basic house on a small lot for about 1.5, 1.6 million. And these are lower than that. They're 1.2 to 1.3 million, most of them. So it's about a $300,000 difference to get a much better quality home and one that can be lockable. And the target market is actually downsizers. So a lot of people in the gap, the demographic is white Australian. It's not very multicultural. And most of those people have been there for 30, 40 years. And there's nowhere to downsize to. There's no available stock. So what's happening is the suburbs getting regentrified. So people are selling up that are in their 50s and 60s. Kids have left home and their houses are tired and they're dated and they want to look or move into something like this, but they don't want to move out of the area. And there's no future supply because it's a green wedge zone and all the trees are protected. This site would never be approved again under the current planning scheme. I was fortunate enough to get it approved through the courts. So there's limited supply of stock. These properties are in high demand and there's virtually no competition in the area. And if they went closer into the city, so if you went and had a look at Ashgrove, a few kilometers down the road, you'd be paying like a 50% premium for the same thing. So you'd be paying an extra probably $500,000 more. So long-term capital growth on these is going to be pretty substantial as well. So another render image from one of the